Here's Brent Rains for Alternate Perceptions Online magazine. And it's March 30th. And excuse me. And I'm interviewing Dr. Gregory Little, our little ongoing feature from psychology to Indian Mounds. And what we're going to discuss right now is the possible connection between Indian Mounds, earthworks, and UFO type phenomena, or strange balls of light, plasma, whatever these things are. They have been known to appear in these various locations, and so it's a kind of an interesting subject.
All right. Well, I believe this is our 8th show, right, Brent? The 8th, like 15-minute show we've done.
I believe it is, Greg.
Okay.
I meant to check on that for sure.
Well, I think this is number 8. You and I talked a night ago, just briefly, just between us, and it's not part of this, but you reminded me of something that I want to say right away at the front end. Initially, my interest in all of this wasn't Indian Mounds. It was UFOs, obviously. That's why this is titled From UFOs to Indian Mounds. But way back, I tell the story of how I knew virtually nothing about mounds. And then I had this series of dreams, and then my wife and I started visiting mounds. Basically, I got sort of professionally obsessed with mounds. And when I say professionally obsessed, it's not the kind of obsession that destroys your life, or, you know, a real obsession is something that gets in the way of living your life. It became sort of a professional hobby, going to mounds, and I had the intention of making a comprehensive illustrated encyclopedia of mounds, which we accomplished. But I've said for years that I really didn't have any connection between mounds and UFOs until my wife and I visited a site in Pinson, Tennessee, and there's a giant mound there, the second tallest one in the country. It's 72 feet tall. It's very, very large. It's called Saul's Mound, has a tomb at the base, never been excavated. And when we took black and white photos of it and had them developed, there were these blobs in the sky, not like orbs, but blobs that really looked like they were in the clouds. I had it analyzed by the lab I was using, photographic lab at what was then Memphis State University. They didn't know what it was. It wasn't a developing error. They just said, we don't know. But you reminded me that back in the 70s, and probably while I was writing the archetype experience before I got into this obsession on mounds, John Keel talked about the link between Indian Mounds and UFOs many times in his books. And I had forgotten all about that. And even in preparing, rereading a lot of Keel for the new book, it just didn't register on me. I had totally forgotten about that Keel, in fact, had said that Indian Mounds seem to have a statistically unexpected high level of UFO activity around them. To some extent, that's because he did a lot of the research in those early 70s in the Kanawha River Valley of West Virginia, and along the Ohio River, where there are loads of Indian mounds in that area. So that may have been the clue with Keel. I don't know. But that's how I really got into the UFO part of mounds. It was the combination of probably having it planted in the back of my mind, or the unconscious, and then having it stimulated by all those dreams, and then the pictures at the mounds and so on. It's an interesting story, and it's something that I think is relevant to people who get into unusual hobbies. There's probably something tinkering around in the back of their mind that links to it.
Yeah. I as I remember that photograph, which I've looked at a number of times, because you and Laura brought me and my wife Joan to Pinson years ago, and of course we've been there many times now. It's quite a sight. And I remember you wrote a 2-part article in Fake Magazine about Pinson back in the 90s.
No, that was 87 and 88. I've got copies of it here, the 2-part article, 1987 and 1988. And actually in 1984, I wrote an article in a now defunct monthly magazine called cocoon, and it was on mounds. And I really didn't know enough about them at the time. I was simply fascinated by the earthworks and the mounds and the formations, thinking that they probably had something to do with astronomical alignments. But I really didn't know at the time. And back then, we didn't have the same technology we have today, where you can plug in like a GPS, plug in a date, and you can see what the sky looked like at the time, and very precisely measure where stars would rise and set, where the sun would rise and set, and all that computer stellar alignment stuff has made it much easier to figure out what these sites are all about.
Yeah. Well, I was interested a few years back reading one of Paul Devereaux's books, where he described how a lot of the temples, ancient temple sites over in India and China, were placed there because people had seen strange balls of light in those areas, and they considered it sacred. And I was listening to an interview recently with a lady over in Italy who was talking about how her husband was documenting sites where a lot of these ancient churches, centuries old, have a lot of UFO type activity in the area. So it's something that keeps popping up here and there.
Well, it does, and we know there are geomagnetic anomalies at a lot of ancient sites that are sacred sites. Geomagnetic anomalies, there are places like Sedona, Arizona, for example. There are geomagnetic anomalies around Sedona. And of course, there's the red rocks. Why are they red? Well, they have iron content in them, and they have other elements in them and minerals that are piezoelectric effects. Under pressure, they create electrical discharges. But a lot of people believe there are vortices or vortex sites in Sedona. The Four Corners area has a lot of the same thing, a lot of geomagnetic anomalies. And there, it's pretty clear. I think the relationship has been made that between these ancient sacred sites and geomagnetic anomalies. I think that's made.
Yeah, and of course that site, Portsmouth, Ohio, that we visited some years back, and of course you and Laura were leading a tour for the ARE Association for Research Enlightenment Indian Mound tour, and there were people there who, when we did kind of a meditation and such, there was of course a lot of people in the ARE have some psychic sensitivity. They're kind of drawn to the organization, but people were reporting various anomalous type things.
Well, you were reporting it too. So let me set this up quickly. What it is, Portsmouth, Ohio is probably one of the most incredible sites, mostly destroyed now, of earthworks, long earthworks extending. This is incredible. They extend from the hill in Portsmouth at the very top of the hill. Portsmouth is on this steep decline that goes down to the Ohio River. So from up there, there are these horseshoe-shaped earthworks, roughly 150 feet around, but it's a horseshoe. The walls are 16 feet high of it. And then it has linear lines of earth that run from there down to the southwest, going 7 miles, and then they cross the Ohio River to another set of earthworks several miles away. Then to the southeast, there's another set of lines, double lines, that go 5 miles to the Ohio River, pick up on the other side, go 2 miles across on the other side in Kentucky, and then there's this massive circular earthwork that was laid out basically the way Plato described the center city of Atlantis. So let's bring it to the horseshoe. So when we did that, yes, my wife and I were sort of leaders in this tour. You and your wife were also, and you guys performed the ceremonies at these places, which we held a lot of ceremonies. A lot of people had weird experiences, but in this horseshoe, you and your wife went in first and set up, right?
Right, yeah.
And then I'll let you go from there.
Okay, well, we saged around the site, the walls, and the interior, and normally, of course, the procedure would be to smudge ourselves first. We didn't realize that in our zeal to get in there and before everyone else got there, we should have smudged ourselves first. We kind of And that became obvious to us when we looked for our foot-long feather that we had laying on a little blanket, and it wasn't there. We realized, oh, I wonder if this is kind of a sign. So we needed to smudge, we realized. So we smudged ourselves with sage. Joan smudged me, I smudged her. We did it by hand, of course, instead of using a feather. And then after we were done, there was the feather back on the blanket. No, you know.
I will say too that sitting in there, it was it felt like you were in some sort of a isolation room where there was no sound. There was even a plane that went overhead that I never heard. I could see it, and other people could see it. Other times where there some planes went across and I could hear them, but inside of that enclosure, I could not hear that plane, and it sounded almost like we were in this soundproof room where there was just, I mean, it was really very, very strange. Lots of the people after it reported strange experiences. Am I correct in that? Because I think they contacted you about it.
Yeah, there were two people. I think they felt like they had had a review of a past life, and then there were people who were seeing, like kind of like visionary things, a strange light or something, or a vibration in the ground beneath them. You know, when the feather incident happened, I had a tape recorder nearby, and it had a built-in mic. I didn't use an attachment mic, but I should have picked up something. I had it right to me, telling what had happened, and you could just barely hear me. There was a helicopter been flying over, there was a lawnmower, there was traffic, and Joan was standing just a couple 30 feet away and couldn't even hear anything of her. So it was kind of unusual. And what was really noteworthy is later on, we're talking to the lady who was the wife of the mayor who allowed us to go into this site downtown, and she and Joan are talking, and then just right across the table, like 3 feet, it was a long table, and they were sitting right across from each other, and they were talking, and Allison said that all of a sudden it was like she could hardly hear Joan, and
Yeah, I remember that.
And I don't think she knew anything about what had happened to us, because she was elsewhere, when we were in the inside the horseshoe.
Let me mention this. If anybody, if you go to Portsmouth, you can't just go in there. It's fenced. You have to get special permission. Actually, permission comes from the Cherokee tribe of Oklahoma. They have that is theirs apparently. But we got special permission to go in there and look at it. In fact, that was one of the people that went on that tour just raved about it, said it was fantastic. And here's the thing. I guess the thing that I'd probably stop on here, and that is, I believe that America's mounds and earthworks are the most unappreciated archaeological wonders in the world. There are tens of thousands of them that still exist. Some of the earthworks are just incredible. They're mind-blowing. People who come over from like England that have seen Stonehenge, Avebury, those that have gone to other sites over in England and in Europe that are ancient sites, they are amazed at what is in America, and they really can't believe why these sites aren't more popular and why Americans don't really know about them. You know this. You've been with us when we've tried to find some sites and we'd knock on doors. You are a door knocker. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love to take you along. You're willing to go up to any door and talk to the people there and find out what in the world's around here. But what's amazing is you can knock on a door and ask people where there's a mound, and they'll say, I don't know anything about any mounds here. And then we'll find out basically the mound is like 100 yards away from their house. They just don't know about it. The same way with like the Newark, Ohio earthworks, which are just incredible, the circle and octagon. There are people there that live there that don't even know it's there. It is probably one of the top 5 archaeological sites, maybe in the world. That might stretch it a bit, but it's certainly as incredible as anything else that exists. It's not like the pyramid with a lot of stones, but it actually, to me, is more incredible than the pyramid in some ways because of its geometric design and shape and what it does. That's the thing. It's what these earthworks and mounds do. The Newark, Ohio Circle and Octagon, gigantic formation, charts the moon's movements over 18.61 years perfectly. So I can't, we don't have time to get into its design. A lot of people know about it. They can look it up, and Newark Earthworks, Octagon, Circle, and have a look at it. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is. I remember being with you the first time that I had been to the site, and I remember it was at night, and you want to take some night pictures, and you stopped in the store to get directions because we kind of got a little lost, and the guy in the store had told you, never heard of this place,
Yeah.
lived there for years.
Yeah. That's just one of lots and lots of examples. We continue to have that happen. I know you know this, Laura and I, my wife Laura and I went on a 7-day excursion a couple of weeks ago and went down the Mississippi River on the Mississippi side, going to Indian Mounds, and then we came up the other side of the river, which is in Louisiana, to come back to Memphis. We probably saw 60, 70 mounds. I don't really know. We didn't actually count them. We did make lists of all the mounds that we photographed and where the sites were. But people there's very little appreciation for them. Very, very little. That may go to some sort of cultural bias against Native Americans, and maybe we've pushed them out of our memory. Certainly, schools don't teach anything about Native American history. I suspect there's not a single textbook used in elementary schools or high schools that talk about the geometric earthworks and what the Native Americans built thousands of years ago. I'll bet it's not in a single textbook. And I think I'll check that out, because I believe that kind of stuff should be in textbooks in elementary school when it gets to American history.
Yeah, I agree. It's I've tried to tell my grandson next door a little about it. He seems, he just doesn't see the importance of it right now.
Well, take him up to Newark and let him see that. He might. So where are we going with this next time? What do you want to talk about giants next time? Since
Sure.
we're pretty much at the end, let's get into the giant stuff, and we'll very soon get into talking about this UFOs and aliens and the paranormal and all that, because the new book that I've talked about with you, and I know you know about it because you actually wrote a blurb for it, and you're referenced in it a lot. Let me grab it here. I got a copy today, but it won't be out for a while. It's called Origins of the Gods. It's by Andrew Collins and myself, and Eric Van Doniken. Good old Eric Van Doniken wrote the preface to this book and wrote a blurb. Graham Hancock has written a blurb. Lots of other people have, but Eric wrote quite a lot, and he sees our ideas as very possible in explaining a lot of the ancient alien visitations and UFOs and so on.
Wow. But that's, it's an extraordinary book. And
well, thank you. I know you've read it.
Yeah, I've dabbled in it some. I'm still.
All right. Well, you'll get a hard copy soon. They sent it to me. It's a month before it's going to be released in bookstores. The audio version will be available in early April. The ebook will be available in the middle of April, and early May is when the paper copies. And that all has to do with supply side issues. It has to do with literally shipping books to thousands of bookstores and Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Books A Million and Simon and Schuster and wherever else. I don't know.
It'll be all over the place.
Yep. Always a pleasure, Brent. Always a pleasure.
Enjoy it, Greg. Thanks a lot.
Till next time.
Take care. On to the next.